What happens when a cop thinks his badge makes him untouchable? But he's about to meet a woman who won't back down. It was a quiet night in Toledo, Ohio. Just past 11 p.m. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace, a decorated military leader, was driving home, tired but steady. But Sergeant Mercer had other plans. This was no ordinary traffic stop. Hit subscribe now and stay with us. This story is just getting started. The night air was thick with silence, broken only by the steady hum of tires rolling on the asphalt. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace was tired, bone-deep tired. After a long day coordinating logistics at the base 2 hours south, her mind was already home, already at rest. The government-issued SUV she drove wasn't flashy. It was quiet, simple, just like her. No distractions, no pretense. She hummed softly to herself, eyes fixed on the road. The streets of Toledo were mostly empty at this hour. Just a few late workers heading home, their headlights fading in the distance. Adrienne felt safe, confident, experienced. After more than 2 decades in uniform, 2 overseas tours, and countless high-pressure situations, this was just another drive. But then, flashing blue lights stabbed through the night. Her heart skipped. Not out of fear, but annoyance. "What now?" she muttered, pulling over smoothly. It wasn't the first time she'd been stopped. It wouldn't be the last. But something about this felt different. Parked near Reynolds Road, Sergeant Daniel Mercer sat slouched behind the wheel of his cruiser. The lukewarm coffee beside him had long gone cold. His eyes flicked up from his phone as the black SUV rolled past. Bored, tired, frustrated. 15 years on the force had taken their toll. Mercer was the kind of cop who demanded respect without asking. A man who wielded his badge like a weapon, not a symbol of service. And tonight, the opportunity to assert that power had finally arrived. He tossed the coffee cup aside, flipped on his lights, and followed Adrienne. As the cruiser pulled up behind her, she kept her cool. Rolling down the window halfway, she offered a steady voice. "Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped?" Mercer's flashlight pierced through the glass, cold and sharp. "You were drifting between lanes, didn't signal. Looks like you might have been drinking." Adrienne raised a brow. "I wasn't." The words were simple, firm. "License and registration," Mercer barked. There was no greeting, no kindness, just orders. Adrienne slowly reached into the glove box, pulling out her papers. "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." Mercer glanced at her military ID, then smirked. "Doesn't mean you're above the law." Her jaw tightened. "I never said I was." But the tension in the air thickened. Mercer stepped closer, voice sharp. "Step out of the vehicle. Sobriety test." Confused, Adrienne blinked. "On what grounds?" He didn't answer. He yanked. Open her door. "Out, now." Without a word, Adrienne hit record on her phone. "For the record, this conversation is being recorded." Mercer's eyes flickered briefly to the screen, hesitation flashing, then vanished. "Out, now!" She stepped out. Standing tall but calm, her posture radiated quiet strength, a contrast to Mercer's rigid aggression. She wasn't angry. Not yet. But the simmering fire beneath her calm was unmistakable. For Mercer, this was a test of control. For Adrienne, it was a moment that would change everything. As Mercer ordered her to walk the line, the standard roadside sobriety test, she moved with steady precision. No stumbles, no hesitation, no slurred words. But still, Mercer wrote her a ticket. Failure to maintain lane. Adrienne accepted the paper silently. Her eyes, though, held a silent promise. This wasn't over. Inside the cruiser, Mercer leaned back, a smirk curling at his lips. "Some woman tried to pull rank on me," he joked later in the break room. "Flashed her military ID like it was supposed to scare me." Officer Diaz frowned. "Wallace? Lieutenant Colonel Wallace? She spoke at the academy last year. Runs logistics at Fort Wayne, Bronze Star, 2 deployments." Mercer waved it off. "Don't care who she is. I'm the law on these streets." But deep down, a seed of doubt took root. A whisper that maybe this wasn't just another traffic stop. Back at her base, Adrienne replayed every moment in her mind. The way Mercer's hand hovered near his holster. The tone in his voice, disrespectful, threatening, the cold dismissal of her questions. She wasn't the type to cause drama. Not after 22 years of service, facing dangers far worse than a traffic stop. But this was personal, not just for her, but for every person who had been silenced, pushed down, or scared into submission by someone abusing their power. Her assistant, Sergeant Daniels, knocked gently on her office door. "You good, ma'am?" Adrienne looked up, eyes tired but resolute. "No," she said softly, "but I'm handling it." Daniels hesitated. "You sure you want to make this public?" She nodded. "I'm not after drama. I want accountability." The quiet night had ignited a battle, one between pride and principle, power and justice, and neither Adrienne nor Mercer would walk away the same. Behind the badge, a colleague's dilemma. Officer Maria Diaz had worked with Sergeant Daniel Mercer for nearly 3 years. She respected his experience. 15 years on the force wasn't easy, and Mercer had earned his reputation as tough and unshakable. But lately, she'd been seeing cracks beneath that hardened exterior. The morning after the traffic stop, Diaz sat at the break room table, sipping her coffee. Mercer was there too, laughing and joking about the military lady who tried to pull rank on him. Diaz frowned, her instincts uneasy. She knew Adrienne Wallace, not personally, but by reputation. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace had spoken at the police academy the previous year, sharing lessons on leadership and discipline. A decorated veteran with a Bronze Star and multiple deployments, Wallace was exactly the kind of person you respected, even if you didn't always agree with. Diaz felt a knot twist in her stomach as she watched Mercer dismiss Adrienne's rank. With a shrug, "Don't care who she is," he said. "I'm the law." Maria's thoughts raced. She admired Adrienne's calm strength, the way she handled herself under pressure, and she worried about Mercer's attitude. She could see how his pride was blinding him, how his need for control was turning into something dangerous. That night, Diaz lay awake, replaying Mercer's words and the story she'd heard from the brief recount of the stop. "Flashed her military ID like it was supposed to scare me," Mercer had said. But Maria knew it wasn't about fear. It was about Mercer's refusal to acknowledge someone who didn't fit his narrative. She wondered what Adrienne must have felt, standing there on that dark street, being treated like a criminal when she had done nothing wrong. Maria thought of her own family, the women in her life who had faced unfair treatment just for speaking up. She knew the cost of silence. At the station the next day, tension hummed beneath the surface. Whispers floated. In the hallways, glances exchanged but never spoken aloud. Mercer seemed untouched on the outside, his usual swagger intact. But Diaz noticed the way others looked at him differently now. The aura of invincibility was fading. Maria struggled with her role. She wanted to support her colleague, but she was cautious. "Don't get involved," some warned her. "This is between Mercer and that military lady." But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a personal spat. It was a reflection of something bigger, an issue with power, respect, and accountability within the force. Her mind kept returning to Adrienne's quiet determination. Diaz had heard that Adrienne wasn't the type to make noise over small things. She'd been through wars and chaos. This traffic stop was a different kind of battle, but one Adrienne was ready to fight. The idea of Mercer thinking he was untouchable, just because he wore a badge, made Maria uneasy. She wondered if Mercer himself even realized how far he had strayed from what the badge should represent. As the days passed, Maria watched the unfolding story with growing concern. Mercer's jokes became less frequent, his usual confidence waning. Meanwhile, word spread that Adrienne had contacted military lawyers, filed complaints, and was preparing to take legal action. Maria admired Adrienne's courage but feared what this could mean for Mercer, and for the department as a whole. Would this case open old wounds? Would it force the police to confront uncomfortable truths? At home that evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table staring out the window into the dark street. She thought about justice, about respect, and about the weight of responsibility that came with a badge. She made a silent promise to herself, to stand for what was right, even if it meant challenging the system she worked within. Because in the end, the badge was supposed to protect the innocent, not shield the powerful from accountability, and she knew Adrienne Wallace was about to prove just how important that was. The storm gathers. Lines are drawn. The days after the traffic stop were anything but quiet. For Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace, the incident replayed endlessly in her mind like a relentless storm. Every moment on that dark Toledo street gnawed at her. Sergeant Mercer's harsh tone, the cold glare, the way his hand hovered near his holster as if daring her to react. It wasn't just a matter of protocol violated. It was a deep, personal affront. She could have shouted. She could have frozen, but she didn't. Instead, she did something far braver. She chose to fight and fight smart. Back at Fort Wayne, Adrienne sat alone in her office late one evening, the low hum of fluorescent lights her only company. The glow from her computer, screen-illuminated stacks of documents and legal papers she'd begun to collect. Her fingers tapped rhythmically against the desk, a subtle reminder to herself. Control, precision, patience. Her aide, Sergeant Daniels, knocked gently and stepped inside. "Ma'am, you holding up okay?" Adrienne looked up, exhaustion lining her face. "I will. This isn't just about me. It's bigger than that." Daniels nodded, sensing the weight of her words. "The military lawyers?" "Contacted. The Inspector General is involved now." She took a deep breath. "If this goes public, it's going to stir things up. Mercer's got connections, and this department isn't used to being challenged." Daniels hesitated, unsure. "Are you sure you want to take it this far? It could get messy." She met his eyes, steady and unwavering. "I'm not looking for drama. I want accountability. Someone has to set a precedent." Meanwhile, in the cold, fluorescent glare of the Toledo Police Department, Sergeant Mercer sat at his desk, fingers clenched tight around a lukewarm cup of coffee. The casual confidence he wore like armor was beginning to feel brittle. He replayed the night's events over and over. Had he been too harsh, too quick to judge? Mercer hated the uncertainty gnawing at his pride. His colleagues whispered behind his back. The military lady had shaken something inside the precinct, and not for the better. At the station, Mercer's captain called him in. The door shut behind him, blinds drawn tight. Officer Reading's voice was low but firm. "We need to talk." Mercer folded his arms, bracing himself. "About what?" "The traffic stop, the complaint, the lawsuit." Mercer scoffed. "It's just a ticket. She got upset because I didn't roll out the red carpet." Reading leaned forward. "Adrienne Wallace isn't just anyone. She's a high-ranking officer, a war veteran, and she's got the whole thing on camera." Mercer's jaw tightened. "So what?" "I followed the rules." Reading's eyes bore into him. "You lost control. You treated her like a suspect before you knew anything. That's not how this works." For the first time, Mercer found himself without a sharp comeback. The weight of the situation pressed down, cold and relentless. At home, Mercer's wife noticed the change. The easygoing man she married was retreating into silence. His usual jokes were gone, replaced by a sullen quiet. One night she confronted him. "Dan, what's going on? You've been distant." He shrugged, staring at the ceiling. "It's that traffic stop. It's bigger than I thought." She reached for his hand. "You'll get through this. You're a good cop." But Mercer wasn't sure anymore. The line between being a good cop and being accountable was blurring, and it scared him. Back at Fort Wayne, Adrienne's lawyer, Delaney Price, sat across the table with a measured calm that belied the storm around them. "Are you absolutely certain you want to take this to court?" she asked. "This won't just be a fight, it'll be a public spectacle." Adrienne's response was unwavering. "This isn't about me. It's about every person who's been intimidated or silenced. If I back down, what message does that send?" Delaney nodded slowly. "Good. Then we prepare. We make sure the truth is undeniable." The tension mounted as both sides prepared for battle. Mercer, once untouchable behind his badge, now felt the walls closing in, his reputation frayed, the whispers growing louder. He wasn't just fighting Adrienne, he was fighting a system that was beginning to demand accountability. Adrienne, meanwhile, steeled herself. She spent hours reviewing every frame of her phone recording, every word spoken, every gesture. This wasn't just evidence, it was her shield and her sword. One afternoon, as Adrienne walked through the base, her mind was a whirlwind of strategy and resolve. She passed young soldiers, fresh recruits who looked to her as a model of leadership. Her heart ached for them, knowing that the fight she was facing now was the one they might face later. The fight for dignity, for respect, for justice. She paused in front of a mirror, straightened her uniform, and whispered to herself, "Lead with honor, serve with integrity." Because this was more than a court case. It was a test of what leadership truly meant. Back at the police station, Officer Maria Diaz watched the tension escalate. She felt caught between loyalty to her colleagues and the undeniable truth unfolding before her. She knew Mercer's pride wouldn't let him admit fault easily. She also knew that Adrienne's courage was shaking the foundation of the force. Diaz wrestled with her conscience. Could she stay silent? Or was it time to stand for what was right, even if it meant breaking ranks? The stage was set. The players were ready. A collision of worlds. One man clinging to power, one woman demanding justice. Neither would back down, and the city of Toledo held its breath. Justice served, a legacy of courage. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace stood tall in her full uniform, her medals catching the light, each one a symbol of sacrifice, honor, and resilience. She wasn't just a woman in a car that night. She was a leader who had served her country with unwavering dedication. Across the room, Sergeant Daniel Mercer sat stiffly at the defense table. His usual bravado was replaced by a tense, unreadable expression. The videos played again. First Adrienne's phone recording, then Mercer's body cam, exposing every harsh word, every impatient glare, every moment his pride overshadowed his duty. The jury watched closely. The truth was undeniable. When the verdict came, it was decisive. The court found in favor of Adrienne Wallace. Mercer had violated constitutional rights during an unlawful stop. His actions disregarded department rules and basic professional standards. The ruling was clear, and it resonated beyond the walls of the courtroom. No cheers filled the room. No applause echoed. Instead, there was the heavy, solemn silence of justice served. Mercer's lawyer muttered about appeals, but even his voice lacked conviction. Mercer himself lowered his head, the weight of consequence settling in. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, capturing a man whose once untouchable badge now carried a shadow of doubt. Mercer said nothing, retreating into the anonymity of his car, the public eye bearing witness to a fall from grace. Inside, Adrienne checked her phone. A simple message blinked on the screen. "You won. Case closed." She allowed herself a small, quiet nod, not of triumph, but of resolve. The ruling awarded her $35,000 in compensation, but Adrienne declined to focus on the money. For her, this was never about financial gain. It was about accountability, about sending a message that power without responsibility is not only dangerous, it is unacceptable. Weeks later, at Fort Wayne, Adrienne stood before a room of fresh recruits. Young soldiers, eager and uncertain, looked up to her, inspired by the story of her fight. "How many of you think a uniform automatically earns respect?" she asked. A few hands went up, some confident, others hesitant. Adrienne smiled gently. "Respect isn't given freely. It's earned through every choice, every action. The badge, the rank. These are not shields. They are burdens. If you can't carry them with honor, you don't deserve them." She paused, locking eyes with the room. "When I was stopped that night," she said, "I could have stayed silent. I could have let the injustice slide, but I didn't, because silence helps the wrongdoers. Courage defends us all." Her words settled like a quiet storm, powerful and unyielding. In the weeks that followed, Mercer faced suspension and an uncertain future. Rumors swirled that his career in law enforcement might be over. The protection he once felt behind his badge was gone, replaced by scrutiny and doubt. For Adrienne, life moved forward, not in headlines or interviews, but in quiet strength. She returned to her duties, training soldiers, running missions, leading. With the integrity that had defined her career, her battle was won, but the war for justice was ongoing. She knew this wasn't just her story. It was the story of countless others silenced by fear or power. This story leaves us with a powerful lesson. True leadership is not about demanding respect through titles or force. It is about earning it through integrity, accountability, and courage. Adrienne Wallace's journey reminds us that a badge is not a license to intimidate, but a call to serve with honor. That standing up to injustice requires strength, not just of body, but of character. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak out when the world expects us to stay silent. So when you face moments of unfairness or abuse, remember Adrienne's story. Remember that power without responsibility is empty. And remember that real courage often shows in calm, steady resistance. Because justice isn't just about rules or courts. It's about the choices we make every day to stand up for what's right. Thank you for joining this story. If Adrienne's courage inspired you, hit subscribe and share this video. Let's spread the message, because together, our voices can hold the powerful accountable and protect the vulnerable.